The envelope was taped to the underside of a shoebox on the top shelf of my mother's closet, behind 3 winter coats she hadn't worn since 2014. It was manila, yellowed at the edges, sealed with packing tape that had turned brittle and amber with age. Written across the front in my mother's careful handwriting were 4 words. "Do not open, Helen." Helen is my name. I almost respected her wishes. My mother, Joan Westbrook, had just suffered a major stroke. She was in the ICU at Mercy General in Roanoke, Virginia, unconscious, breathing through a tube, and the doctors weren't optimistic. I was cleaning her apartment not because she asked me to, but because I needed something to do with my hands while my heart was breaking. I should have put the envelope back. I should have waited. But there's something about the words "do not open" that makes you need to know what's inside, especially when the person who wrote them might never be able to explain why. I sat on the edge of my mother's bed and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were 4 documents. A birth certificate, not the one I'd always known, the Commonwealth of Virginia certificate that said Helen Marie Westbrook, born March 14, 1991, to Joan and Robert Westbrook. This was a different one. An original. It said Helen Marie Caldwell, born March 14, 1991, to Margaret Caldwell and Thomas Aldridge. Caldwell. A name I'd never heard. Aldridge. A name I heard every single day. Because it was my husband's name. Because I was Helen Aldridge now. Because I'd married Patrick Aldridge 3 years ago in a ceremony at his family's property outside Lynchburg, surrounded by Aldridges, dozens of them, and not one of them had looked at me like they recognized something familiar. The second document was an adoption decree. Filed April 8, 1991, 25 days after my birth. Joan and Robert Westbrook adopting Helen Marie Caldwell. Name changed to Helen Marie Westbrook. Private adoption. Sealed records. Judge's signature. Final. The third document was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "Joan, I know this is asking too much. But I can't keep her and I can't let Thomas's family find out she exists. They'd take her from me and I'd never see her again. Please raise her as your own. I'll never contact you or her. You have my word. Margaret." And the fourth document was a photograph. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, holding a newborn wrapped in a yellow blanket. The woman had dark hair and eyes that were unmistakably mine. On the back, in different handwriting, "Margaret and baby Helen, March 15, 1991. I sat on that bed for an hour. The world I thought I knew, Helen Westbrook, daughter of Joan and Robert, wife of Patrick, resident of a small house in Salem, Virginia, kindergarten teacher at Glenvar Elementary. That world had cracked open and underneath was a stranger named Helen Caldwell, whose biological father shared a last name with the man she married. I didn't call Patrick that night. I couldn't. I needed to think. I needed to understand before I reacted. Robert Westbrook, the man I'd called Dad my entire life, died when I was 14. Heart attack. Sudden. He never told me I was adopted. My mother never told me. 33 years of silence, sealed with packing tape in a shoebox. The next morning I did what any person in 2024 would do. I searched the internet. Thomas Aldridge. Roanoke, Virginia. Lynchburg area. Thomas Aldridge Sr., retired attorney. Prominent family. 3 children, Thomas Jr., Elizabeth and Patrick. My husband was the youngest. I searched Margaret Caldwell. Found a death notice from 2003. Margaret and Caldwell, age 31, died in Raleigh, North Carolina. No surviving family listed. She died when I was 12. She kept her word. She never contacted us. But she kept a connection to the Aldridge family alive through a cruel coincidence that nobody saw coming. Her biological daughter, raised under a different name, fell in love with and married the youngest son of the man who fathered her. The question that consumed me wasn't whether Patrick and I were related by blood. We weren't. Thomas Aldridge Sr. was my biological father. Patrick was his son from his marriage. Patrick and I shared no biological mother. We were technically half-siblings. Half-siblings who were married. Who shared a bed. Who were trying to have a baby. I drove to the hospital that afternoon. My mother was still unconscious. I sat beside her bed holding her hand. The same hand that had sealed that envelope and hidden it behind winter coats, hoping I'd never find it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. No answer except the rhythmic beeping of machines. I told Patrick that evening. I didn't ease into it. I couldn't. I sat him down at the kitchen table, put the documents in front of him, and watched his face as he read each one. When he got to the name Thomas Aldridge, the color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He put down the paper, closed his eyes, and said 5 words I wasn't expecting. My father told me everything. The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. What? I managed. 6 months ago. Dad called me to his office. Told me he'd had a relationship when he was young, before he married Mom. A woman named Margaret. She got pregnant. He offered to support the child, but Margaret refused. Said she'd found someone to adopt the baby, and she didn't want the Aldridge name anywhere near her daughter. He said he respected her wishes and never looked for the child. 6 months ago. You've known for 6 months. He didn't tell me because of you, Helen. He didn't even know about you. He told me because he's getting older, and he wanted his affairs in order. He wanted me to know that somewhere out there, I had a half-sister. And it never occurred to you, or to him, that your half-sister might be me? Patrick opened his eyes. They were red. He didn't know your birth name. He didn't know where Margaret placed the baby. He didn't even know if the child was a girl. Margaret told him nothing after the adoption. But you could have investigated. You could have. Helen. His voice cracked. I didn't want to know. I was terrified of knowing. Because there was a part of me, a part one couldn't admit, that looked at you sometimes and thought, there's something familiar here. Something I can't explain. And I pushed that thought away because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. We sat at that kitchen table until 2 a.m. We didn't yell. We didn't cry. We talked. Carefully, painfully, honestly, the way two people talk when the ground beneath them has disappeared and the only thing holding them up is the conversation itself. The questions were brutal. Could we stay married? Legally, we could. Virginia doesn't prohibit marriages between half-siblings who didn't know their relation at the time of marriage. Should we? That was a different question. One that didn't have a legal answer. What about children? We'd been trying for 8 months. The genetic counselor we saw the following week was blunt. Half-siblings share approximately 25% of their DNA. The risk of autosomal recessive disorders in offspring is elevated. Not catastrophic, but significant. You should make this decision with full information. Full information. As if any amount of information could make this decision feel anything other than impossible. Patrick's father, Thomas Aldridge Sr., came to our house 2 weeks later. He was 71 years old, tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who filled a room with his presence. He sat in our living room holding a cup of coffee he never drank and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. You have her eyes, he said quietly. Margaret's eyes. I should have seen it. You didn't look. No, I didn't. And I'm sorry. Not just for not looking, but for creating a situation where looking was necessary. What followed was the hardest 6 months of our lives. Patrick and I saw a therapist, separately and together. We had conversations that felt like surgery without anesthesia. We grieved the relationship we thought we had while trying to figure out what the relationship actually was. We didn't divorce. That might surprise people. It surprised us, honestly. But our therapist said something during one session that changed how we thought about everything. Your relationship wasn't built on biology. It was built on choice. You chose each other before you knew any of this. The question isn't whether the biology changes the choice. The question is whether you can make the choice again, with full knowledge. We chose again. Deliberately. With eyes open. We decided not to have biological children. Instead, we started the adoption process. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. A woman who was adopted, married to her half-brother, adopting a child of their own. Life writes stories that no novelist would dare submit. Thomas Aldridge Sr. set up a trust fund for the child we'd eventually adopt. For Margaret's grandchild, he said. Even if they don't carry her blood, they'll carry her story. My mother woke up 3 weeks after the stroke, partially paralyzed on her left side, but cognitively intact. The first thing she asked when she saw me was, "Did you find it?" Yes. Tears rolled down the right side of her face, the side that still worked. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times, but I promised Margaret. And Robert. Robert loved you so much, Helen. He didn't want you to ever feel like you weren't completely, entirely ours. I was completely, entirely yours, I said. I still am. And Patrick. Patrick and I are okay, Mom. We're different than we were. But we're okay. She reached for my hand with her right hand, the one that still moved, and held it the same way she'd held it my entire life. The same hand that had sealed an envelope and hidden it behind winter coats. The same hand that had wiped my tears, braided my hair, applauded at every school play, and held me through every heartbreak. Adoption doesn't make you less of a parent. Secrets don't make you less of a mother. And love, messy, complicated, genetically tangled love, doesn't stop being love just because the family tree looks different than you expected. We brought our daughter home 4 months ago. Her name is Margaret Joan Aldridge. Margaret for the woman who gave me life. Joan for the woman who raised me. Aldridge for the family that, despite everything, chose to be mine. She's 7 months old now. She has curly hair and a laugh that sounds like wind chimes. She doesn't know any of this story yet. Someday she will. And when she asks, I'll tell her the truth, that families aren't built from blood. They're built from choices. And sometimes the most important choice isn't who you're born to, but who you decide to love anyway. Would you have stayed? Would you have left? Could you have forgiven the secrets? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you think about what family really means, hit like and subscribe for more.